Well, hello and welcome back to the Financial Deviant Podcast. Today's topic is going to be one that I'm personally familiar with, so I can share my personal experiences with this one. But I want to talk about financial advisors. Financial advisors. And, do you need one? What is it that they do for you that you can't do for yourself? Just talk about how we should maybe think about using someone else to help us with our finances. First of all, off the top, I can tell you I have used financial advisors before. And to some extent, I still do today. Because when I first started out being even concerned about building my assets and solidifying my financial foundation, I didn't know anything. As I've said on earlier episodes, didn't know a whole lot. Had to just learn and read and listen and bump my head a few times, but I didn't know a whole lot. So it was for me, I actually think it was a good way for me to start thinking about money in a different way when I started working with a financial advisor. So, but again, what I did was what I did. It's not necessary. And to be honest with you, had my knowledge been a little greater than it was at the time, I could have saved myself a lot of money. I could have saved myself a lot of money. And my nest egg could actually be bigger than it is now. But I don't begrudge that period because, as I said, that's kind of how I started. And I learned a lot. And I had an advisor, which was very important. I'm thankful. My advisor that I started out with initially was a person who walked the talk. That was why he made such an impression on me. He was a person who walked the talk. He wasn't a guy that was just out here trying to tell me what to do with money. We used to have lengthy conversations about what he was doing. And I just learned an awful lot from him. So again, that period was invaluable to me. It really was, because it allowed me to start looking at people who could live a more extravagant lifestyle, but didn't, because that wasn't what was important to them. I remember he drove an old vehicle that probably had 200,000 miles on it. It didn't matter. That wasn't what he was interested in. He was interested in building assets and taking care of his family and starting his children out on the right path. So that was a very pivotal period for me as I started to learn from him. But of course, as I said, what goes with that is that I had to pay sales commissions when he made trades for me. And, there was money tied up in that. But if I had to say today, I'm going to say it was probably worth it because the education alone was probably worth it for me. Now, I probably feel a little differently today. And I'll get into that a little bit, but it was an invaluable period for me. So when you talk about advisors, one of the things that you talk about is how do they get paid? Well, they usually fall into one of four categories, and sometimes there's a combination of these categories. But if you break it down, you have some that get paid on commissions. So in other words, if they make a trade for you, then they get a sales commission that can be a pretty sizable amount of money every time they buy and sell something on your behalf. And one of the common ones also is assets under management fees. In other words, if however much money you have with them that they're working with on your behalf, they charge you a percentage of that amount. And a very common percentage is 1% of assets under management. And that's the number you hear a lot. Some charge more than that. Some charge 1.2% of assets under management. Some 1.5%. Some 2%. That's another way that you pay advisors. Another one is an annual fee or a one-time fee. So for a year's worth of work, you have access to them, and you can have conversations, talk through certain things, help you to put your plan together, ask you questions about your risk tolerance, ask you questions if you're married, what does your spouse do? A lot of times if you're married, they want to at least have one or two conversations with both parties just to kind of make sure that everybody's on the same page. So that's another way. And then the fourth way is hourly fees. You just pay people an hourly rate they might put together a plan for you. Or if you have questions, they may charge you $150, $200, $300, $500 an hour. And I will tell you, it depends on how much money you have with them. Many times that hourly fee is the cheapest way to go. Again, that depends on, like if you have the assets under management model that you're paying your advisor under, that 1% can be substantial. And a lot of times when you talk about paying them a percentage of assets under management, it's not just about the fee. It's not just about the fee. For instance, if somebody had, let's pull a number. Say somebody has $500,000. Well, 1% of $500,000 is $5,000. But that's really too simple, because what you lose when you pay that $5,000 in fee, you might say, man, that's worth it. I mean, for them to do all that for me, that's absolutely worth it. Well, over a 20-year period, that $5,000 compounded at 6% interest is over $16,000. So I mean, so that 5,000 kind of makes it sound really simple and in a sense, maybe cheap, relatively speaking. But what sometimes people miss is you lose the compounding of that 1% if you would have kept it yourself, if that makes sense. So the 1% can be deceiving. And what I have found is that a lot of times people don't know what they're being charged. That is very, very common. Oh yeah, I got an advisor. And to be honest with you, sometimes when people say they have an advisor, it kind of gives, it gives them a sense of I've arrived. But on the other hand, a lot of times they're just absolutely getting gypped. They are absolutely getting gypped by advisors because they don't know what they're being charged. They get their statements. And that's especially true when things are going well. If you've earned a 20% return in a given year, you may not be that concerned about the fees but what you have to understand is that those fees are coming out of your earnings. So that they literally reduce your earnings. So, I don't want to completely beat up on the financial advisor, because I said I've used it before. I just want people to understand and know what they're paying, how much it's costing them. Because I had a list here of some of the things that advisors can do for you. And one of the things they can do is to help you with your asset allocation, help you understand the balance of where you should put your money, what percentage of your contribution should go to equities or stocks, and what percentage should maybe go to bonds, if there's real estate, if there are REITs. And a lot of times they'll help you to understand what your life insurance needs are, and they'll implement that into your plan. They'll talk to you about, college education, 529 funds for your children, those kinds of things. But one of the biggest ones, as I said, is they can help you with asset allocation. Because as I said, when I first got started, I didn't have a clue about this stuff. So I was like, just lead me around, tell me where to go, and I'll go, because I didn't know anything. So another thing that they can do for you is to help you understand tax implications of your investments. And that is not a small thing. Like I said, I don't want to totally just beat up on the advisor, because they definitely can bring value. And that's a big one. Understanding the tax implications, understanding how your various types of accounts get taxed, and if you make certain moves, how your tax liability will be significantly more. Because as I said before, nobody's an expert on everything. So having that person that can help you with that can be very valuable to you. So that's another thing that they can help you with. Another thing they can do is to provide guidance on how much you should save while you're working, and conversely, how much to spend when you retire. And as I said on the last episode, knowing how much to spend in retirement and being willing to spend it is a challenge for a lot of people once they get to retirement age. As a matter of fact, a lot of times they need an advisor more than they did when they were accumulating, especially if they were self-motivated and just had a plan and executed over 20, 25, 30-year career. Those people a lot of times didn't need a whole lot of help if they're what I call DIY investors. But many of those folks, once they get close to retirement, that's when they start saying, okay, as I said in the previous bullet point, the tax implications of me taking this money out, which accounts I should take money out first. For instance, if you have, and you talk about your tax preferred accounts, retirement accounts, like your traditional IRA and your Roth IRA, your 401k that you had at work, and say you have a taxable brokerage account, which accounts do you pull money from first once you get to retirement age? So that's another very, very key thing that a financial advisor can help you with once you get to that point. How much to save while you're working, and very importantly, how much to spend and which accounts to spend from when you retire. There's another area that advisors can help people with, and it could be the one that's where they bring the most value, to be honest with you. And that is, they are able to talk clients down off the ledge when the market goes south. When the things are going south, when you're losing money in your portfolio for a period of time, they can add a lot of value by saying, hey, hold on, let's look at the historical performance. Look at these dips in 2008 and look how it came back in a short period of time. And people who didn't sell multiplied their wealth. A lot of times having someone to talk to like that is invaluable, especially if you're an inexperienced investor. And it's not necessarily inexperienced. If you just don't have the risk tolerance to deal with those situations very well, they can really be of a great help. And another area they can help is as their clients' assets build and their financial pictures become more complex, advisors can be very helpful. A lot of times as you're starting out, it's very simple. It may be just the 401k that you're using for retirement. Perfect. But as things become more complex and you your income grows and your assets grow and you start having different types of assets, many times a financial advisor can help you sort through and many times help you simplify your portfolio so that you can understand it more easily. And I had, my next one had a note here that says just peace of mind. Just peace of mind, having somebody to talk to that has your best interests, which goes into my next one, a financial advisor. If you get a financial advisor, you want to make sure off the top that he or she are fiduciaries. In other words, they are fiduciary in that they have there's a legal requirement that they act in your best interest. So any financial advisor that you are considering talking to, if you're using them right now, you want to know if they are a fiduciary off the very top. Because if they're not, they are free to act like they're acting on your behalf while they're actually performing unnecessary sales of your assets just to gain a commission. So it's not in your best interest, it's actually in their best interest. Now, you may not think that stuff happens, but it absolutely does, especially when things are tight. And the last one I had here, the last bullet point on my list of ways that advisors what they can do for you, or things that they can do for you. Young investors who need someone to hold their hand. And you heard me earlier, that was me. I wanted to know more than I did, but I didn't know what I didn't know. So I was a young investor and I just needed someone to hold my hand. And I had someone to do that. So when you start talking about financial advisors or the people that use them, I kind of categorize them in two different groups. There's the group that says, just do it for me. They'll have you to complete a questionnaire to determine your risk tolerance. They'll speak to you a little bit about the types of investments you'll be comfortable with. They'll talk to you about what your anticipated retirement date is. Many times they're what you call RIAs, or registered investment advisors. And they will handle it for you. You'll sign off on an agreement and they will manage your assets for you. And as I said, many times they will charge you minimum 1% of those assets that are under management. Another thing they will often do is they'll deploy your money into actively managed funds. And you've heard me talk before on here several times about actively managed funds. Actively managed funds are funds that come with additional costs. There are several of those expenses or those fees, and one of the main ones is something called an expense ratio, and it measures how much of a fund's assets, so they invest in a mutual fund on your behalf, how much of a fund's assets are used for administrative and other operating expenses. Administrative, other people, when you have an actively managed fund, there are people who have to touch it, deal with it. You have to pay people, and those are administrative costs that are additional costs that come straight off of your returns. Another charge you'll hear about sometimes is called a sales charge. That's when it's called a load. And it's basically fees that are charged when an advisor buys or sells shares on your behalf, and it's called a load. It's a fee, a sales charge that they get paid. And there are other things. There are management fees that we kind of talked about earlier. But the point is, when you have someone who's in that do it for me category, the advisor will do it for you, but there's very often a fairly significant cost that comes with that. The other group of the two groups I kind of break them up in is the DIY investor, the do-it-yourself. And these people really don't want anything to do with the advisor because they see that, why would I pay an advisor for something that I can do on my own? That's the way they think. You can't convince them otherwise. And there are a lot of people who've been very successful doing it that way. Even if those people use an advisor in the past, a lot of times they'll learn enough to do it on their own, and then they'll drop the advisor. Nothing wrong with that. We're all out here trying to maximize our returns, and if a person is to the point where they feel like they can do it on their own, more power to them. These are people who get offended if you even suggest that they talk to an advisor. You'll often hear them say, the guy doesn't know any more than I do, so why would I pay him? It's one of the things that I've talked about also in the past is low-cost index funds. So of the two groups, the do it for me group that wants the advisor to do everything, there's almost invariably they're going to be additional fees. On the other hand, for the most part, these DIY investors, do-it-yourselfers, they're people who invest in low-cost index funds. They buy the market and ride the waves of the returns that are given by the market. And you've heard me talk many times before about there are very few funds out there that are actively managed that actually outperform the indexes. Why pay someone? Here's the thinking. You can pay someone to do it. And I don't want to sound like I'm beating up on them. You can pay someone to do it because some people don't, just like I was, didn't really know anything. So they paid someone to do it, and it costs them more, and they do not perform better than you would if you just bought the indexes. That's why I'm so high on low-cost index funds, because people can do it. You can buy one or two funds and and invest in it consistently and just let it ride. Or you can do something like purchase a target date retirement fund that I mentioned before, and the fund will do all the work for you. And it'll determine the asset allocation based on your retirement date. And you use index funds to do that, and you save a whole bunch of money on fees, administrative fees. Those are the two groups of people. And I will say sometimes the do-it-yourself investors, as I said earlier, will often, that doesn't mean they will never talk to an advisor, but sometimes when they do, if they got a specific question, they'll just pay an hourly rate. They won't pay 1% of assets under management. They'll just, whatever your hourly rate is, I'll pay that, and then I'm out of your hair. Okay? That's kind of the two groups of people that would use advisors, some to a greater extent than others. So you may be wondering, I talked a little bit about what I've done and the fact that I have used an advisor on occasion. But what do I do today? Well, before I get to today, I will tell you just a short period ago, I was working with another advisor, not the one that I started out with when I was very young, but another advisor. We had moved to this area and wanted to kind of consolidate everything in one place. So I found these guys that I really liked, really nice guys, and we signed an agreement that they would manage some of our assets. He met with my wife and me, like I said earlier, and they just went through the whole questionnaire and like I said, really nice guys. And I stayed with them for a while. But to be honest with you, as time went on, I started to say, you know what? I don't like paying this fee. I think it's a waste of money. And that's especially true when the market is not performing well. Like I said before, when the market is just killing it, and you're earning 20 and 22% returns, you may not care too much about those fees. But when the market is struggling and you still have to pay someone 1%, or in my case, it was actually 1.2% of assets under management, that's a different story. So I started looking, and I was like hard on it, trying to get out of that, because I just as the days went by, I'm like, man, I just don't I feel like I'm getting ripped off. Even though they performed well for me, like I said, they were great guys. I couldn't do it. That was me. That doesn't mean that it's not good for some people. I just started to feel like I knew too much about this stuff to continue to pay that amount of money. I'm not that busy that I can't do something else, and I don't need them to do this much for me. And the other part was that I felt like I wasn't getting really what that fee should have gotten me. If you're going to pay someone that much money to manage your assets, I want to hear from you more than once or twice a year. I want to get communication from you more than once or twice a year. And if I ask you a question, I want to feel like I want to feel like I'm not annoying you. Okay. So there are a number of things that went into that decision. So I decided I was going to make a move. So what am I doing today? Well, I will tell you, I was torn. I was really thinking about just DIY, just doing it all myself. I know enough to do it myself, but it was just a matter of whether I wanted to make the time commitment to do it. So what I did was kind of a compromise. I joined I signed my wife and I up for a program called Personal Advisor Services with Vanguard. And this program is kind of a hybrid. I have access to an advisor. They manage our assets. And one of the main things that they do for us is they rebalance our accounts. Because, and if you remember before when I talked about rebalancing, let's say you have your asset allocation is you want 80% stocks and 20% bonds or something like that. Well, as your stocks or your equities grow, they tend to outgrow your bonds. So if you just let it ride, you might get to a situation where now your asset allocation is more like 90% stocks and 10% bonds because your stocks just grew. They outperformed. So one of the things they will do is they will sell shares in order to bring our assets back into the balance that we want, back to, and in my example, 80-20, if that was what we wanted to do. So that's one of the main things to do. They'll also do something called tax loss harvesting, which is a way to help us to not pay as many taxes as we otherwise would. And as I said, they also give us somebody to talk to. There was one time I called them. I said, "Hey, look, I'm not crazy about the how much of my money you're putting into bonds or international bonds. International bonds is what it was." And they adjusted it based on my feedback. And so those kinds of things. But the reason I went ahead and did it and didn't do it myself was they're only charging me 0.3% of the assets under management. As opposed to 1%, they're charging us 0.3%. And for me, like every individual has to make that decision. For me, that decision, that price point was worth it for what I was getting out of it, and I didn't have to do it. And I can call them up and ask them to do whatever, make suggestions and have conversations about moves I'm thinking about making, those kinds of things. So the 0.3% of assets under management was worth it for me to do it. And as I said, everybody has to make those decisions for themselves. But one of the main reasons I wanted to do it, and this is what I wanted to get to, one of the main reasons I did it was because if something were to happen to me, my wife has a point of contact to go to, and they will help her to get through that period. It's going to be difficult already, but it will give her someone to talk to and ask questions of, and they will hold her hand to walk her through the process of what to do with those funds that we have saved over time. That was one of the main things that got my attention. And to be honest with you, it made her very comfortable. It made her feel really good that she would have that one point of contact if something happened to me and I was no longer around. So that's what I do now. So I guess it's kind of, like I said, it's kind of a hybrid. I'm not totally do it yourself, although they don't handle everything we have, but they handle a significant piece of it. Some stuff I do on my own, but certain funds they manage for us, and we like that because it works out for us and it makes her feel comfortable. And they don't charge 1%. So that's it. So this whole idea of financial advisors, there's a lot of discussion about it. And I know when I first started out, I was talking a lot about the cost. And that is so true, man. It's a lot of money. It can cost you a lot of money depending on what model your advisor is using to charge you. But I just wanted to put this information out there because just to give you something to think about. At the very least, if you do have an advisor, know what you're being charged. If you don't have an advisor and you're thinking about it, go into it understanding specifically what it's going to cost you. Don't wait 2 or 3 years and finally look at a statement and start trying to get interested at that point. By that time, you've paid a lot of money and had no clue that you were paying it. If you're going to pay it, fine. As I said, there's a list of things that advisors can do for you. But just know what you're paying and know what it's costing you and know what it's coming, or know how much money is coming out of your accounts that are not going to benefit you. All right. So I hope this has been of some value to you. I've actually really enjoyed doing this and kind of putting some notes together for this because it's a big topic. It's something I've been close to. As I said, I've used advisors on 2 different occasions, and I'm using one now. Although, again, it's a hybrid model that's very inexpensive, and it's working for us right now. And I will tell you, there's a chance I may even drop it because part of me still says, I can do this on my own. It's just a matter of whether I want to commit the time to it to do it. And that's the trade-off. And right now, I'm going to stay where I am because I kind of like having someone do it. And so I can focus on other things that are important to me. All right. So this is the Financial Deviant Podcast. You guys have a great day. Have a great week. Have a great year. And be on the lookout for an announcement about a live event that I want to do just to kind of get close to people and have people have the opportunity to ask questions and just have discussions, make suggestions, just exchange ideas because nobody knows it all. And looking forward to doing that. Should be fun. I've got my son put together a flyer for me to kind of kick that off, and should be fun. So until next time, this is the Financial Deviant Podcast saying so long.